Canada, France, Britain, Germany, Spain. What do all these countries have in common when it comes to Israel? Hi, I'm Daniel Seaman, and you're watching Straight Up here on JNS Studios. What do these countries all have in common when it comes to Israel? Doesn't seem to be a lot, except for one thing: moral clarity, as you may call it, self-righteousness, having a moral compass. This when it comes to Gazans, not when it comes to Israel. It seems that when Israel is involved, these countries self-righteously are always on the guard to make sure that no crimes against humanity are being performed. We're not talking about the terrorists. We're talking about the state of Israel, the democratic state of Israel. That they're always observing. They're always watching. These countries always have it in for Israel to make sure that we're abiding by the laws that none of them seem to be holding for themselves first, and certainly when it comes to terrorist entities, Islamic countries, or dictators such as those in Syria or other places in the Middle East. Lately, they've been looking into possible war crimes committed by Israel in the war. War crimes such as what? Oh, they don't know, but they've been hearing from the media who are employing terrorists or people with terrorist connections and UN organizations who have all been exposed as having terrorist connections in Gaza, certainly in Lebanon, etc., have been accusing Israel of. These countries immediately all stand in line and point the finger at Israel and have to check into what Israel is doing. That's the same time when missiles are still falling on the civilians here, both from Gaza and also from Syria, and not to mention Yemen. Have any of these countries questioned Syria, Lebanon, or even Yemen for war crimes? The targeting of a civilian population is considered a war crime. This is what Israel has been dealing with since peace supposedly was achieved here. At least that's what the Nobel Peace Prize thought when they gave the Peace Prize to Yasser Arafat almost 30 years ago as well. But since that time, Israel has been consistently dealing with suicide bombings against its civilians, rocket fire against its civilians, yet none of these countries thought at any time raising it at the United Nations or imposing sanctions on the PLO or the Palestinian Authority, not to mention Hamas or Hezbollah in Lebanon. No, these are acceptable. It's only when Israel does something to defend itself when suddenly they become so insistent on the fact that we need to observe international law and be very careful with how we are conducting our military against the most ruthless of terrorists. But there's nothing new with this. This has been Israel's experience back through 1947. Even at that time, when the United Nations decided to have the partition plan and accept the creation of a Jewish state in its historical land, the land of Israel, even then, when the Arabs did not accept the UN resolution, when the Arab countries, which is their right, the Arab countries had a right not to accept it. What they did not have a right to do was go on an all-out war against the state of Israel. But even then, Israel was left on its own. None of the countries came to our support. None of the countries in the world came to our defense. At that time, only Czechoslovakia sold weapons to the state of Israel. And if you didn't have a Jewish mafia in the United States, we wouldn't have gotten weapons from the United States either. But the rest of the international community stood aside, wished us good luck, and I believe in many ways we're hoping the Arabs would be successful. They lost the 48 war, the war of Israeli independence. And it didn't end there. Throughout the years, there was a boycott against Israel by European countries, by the United States. They refused to sell weapons, despite the fact that from 1948 till 1967, there was a consistent war of terrorism against Israel launched from the Arab countries bordering on the state of Israel, the young state of Israel at the time. I remind you, there was no occupation. There was no Israeli aggression against these countries. We were a country of less than 1 million, and not to mention 800,000 refugees who came here from Arab countries. There is no Jewish refugee problem because Israel took them in. And then, this week, exactly, in 1967, Israel was in a period of preparation for a war that Egypt and Syria were threatening against us. Abba Eban, the then foreign minister of the state of Israel, went to all the capitals from the United States, through Europe, Britain, and France, Germany, asking them, begging them, pointing to the direction of Nasser, who was the president of Egypt, who said he is on a war to annihilate the state of Israel. And for 3 weeks, the international community, except for patting Abba Eban on the back and saying, good luck, we wish you luck, we're all there rooting for you, none of them moved a finger. And what happened was that within 6 days, we were able to defeat 7 Arab countries who assaulted us on June 5th of 1967. It's only when Israel stands up for itself when suddenly the international community becomes concerned. And suddenly they all become self-righteous and sanctimonious. Speaking about sanctimonious, here you have a picture of these putzes from Europe going on a love boat, the ISIS love boat, and floating in the direction to save Gaza from the ruthless Israelis, together with this little putz who's sipping margaritas as the sun sets over the Mediterranean, because that's how they're going to help the Gazans, not to mention the climate. So this is what Israel is dealing with, that and with a media that's constantly pushing and pounding and criticizing us. And yet they're surprised how we continue to move on. Now, there are Israelis who are concerned about this. There are Israelis who are saying, oh my God, we're going to lose international support, as if we ever had it. But I'm not worried about that, and most Israelis aren't either, because most of us know not only that we're right and we're defending our families, our children, and making sure that the Jewish people, for once and for all, after 2,000 years, are safe here, but we also put our belief and our trust in God. When our soldiers go into the battlefield, they know exactly what they're fighting for. Just like this group of soldiers from Givati before entering the Gaza Strip. And then there's these soldiers here from the Golani Brigade entering also the Gaza Strip. And finally, something that's closer to my heart, not only because I was a paratrooper myself, but it's also my son's unit from the paratroopers as they were entering Lebanon just last year, and they were saying what is important to all of us. And true, Am Yisrael Chai, that's what keeps us together with Hashem, who bless the people of Israel. To elaborate on these topics that I just brought up, I thought it'd be interesting to talk to a longtime Israeli journalist who has a lot of experience with covering European countries for a large number of Israeli papers over the years. If I believe it's also with Haaretz newspaper, today with the Jerusalem Post, Israel Hayom. Eldad Beck, who is, in addition to being a journalist, is also the author of 5 books. His most recent book, his 5th book, is Late Reconciliation on the Troubled History of Relations between Austria and Israel, which he published just a few months ago. And you're at the moment, Eldad, thank you for joining us. You're in Austria.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me with you in your show.
More than happy to. How long are you going to be in Austria for?
Depends how you count it, but actually I just came from Israel a few days ago. I'm sort of sharing my time right now between Israel and Austria.
In Austria. So you're experiencing firsthand, and you've done that over the years. I know you've been in Germany and covered France. What can we say right now from the Israeli perspective? People here are a bit nervous about what's going on in Europe. Can you give us some insights of what you've experienced, and from your experience as a journalist covering those areas, what do you see in relations to Israel? Is it different? How different is it? What insights can you give us at the moment?
Well, I think that first of all, we need to go back into history in order to get proportions of what's happening right now. What seems to be a diplomatic tsunami, an anti-Israeli diplomatic tsunami, is definitely not something that we have not seen in the past. Unfortunately, in the last 40 years, and even more than that, we every time Israel found itself in a war against mainly the so-called Palestinians, but also against the terrorist organizations in Lebanon, the public opinion, the international public opinion, turned its back to Israel. And we keep on seeing exactly the same patterns of behavior of the international public opinion, which is shaped by the international media, to the Israeli Arab conflict. I mean, it's not the first time, and it's quite amazing to see it repeating itself, that the international media chooses to believe the lies of the Arab side, to propagate it, and thus to shape a very anti-Israeli public opinion. Now, we have seen again and again in the past that these lies were uncovered, yet the international media, the international press, keeps on falling in this trap, so-called falling in this trap, because they
Right.
know exactly where they fall, and then serving the Arab anti-Israeli propaganda, thus becoming a negative player in the conflict between Israel and its Arab neighbors. So we've seen it in the after the first Lebanon war in '82. We've seen it with the first Intifada, the second Intifada, the second Lebanon war, and every Gaza operation that we had since 2008, 2009, in a situation where the world was supposed to be supportive of the Israeli stand, because we have given the Palestinians, we were the first to give the Palestinians their independence,
Right.
self rule capacity. And look what they have done out of it. So instead of standing with Israel, with the truth, the international press is choosing again and again the lies, the propaganda, the hate, thus shaping a very anti Israeli public opinion. And at the end of it, we see that the political level sort of cedes to the anti-Israeli public opinion and adopts an anti-Israeli policy. So nothing that we haven't seen in the past. It's just a repetition of things that we have witnessed a while ago.
So would you say it's public opinion affecting the governments, or the governments enjoying the fact that the media is sort of vocalizing supposed public opinion so they can just do what they want to do, which is their own policy, which is catering to the Arab, the Islamic world?
It's an interesting question. The chicken or the egg? It's a vicious circle, and I am not sure that I have an answer to you, because in if you take, for example, um, the situation in Germany, the political establishment wanted for years to achieve a normalization of their relation with Israel, which means to erase the uniqueness of the this relation due to the history countries. And in this case, indeed, we see a situation in which the politics is letting the press and the public opinion do the work which they were hoping to achieve, meaning normalize relations with Israel. If you take other countries like France, I'm not so sure that the political establishment really wants to be so anti-Israeli as it has become. I believe that in the case of France, there is definitely political calculations that come in shaping the anti-Israeli position, and mainly the fact that Macron is right now very dependent of the left, the radical left, and the votes of the Muslims within the population of France. So this is something that we have seen Macron in the last 7 years change completely from somebody who was quite clearly standing with Israel into somebody who is promoting a very anti-Israeli approach. And this whole initiative of recognizing a Palestinian state that France is now pushing to is definitely a sign of weakness of the political establishment in France.
Well, maybe Macron needs somebody to knock some sense into him. which we see somebody tried to do it this week, but not for Israel, but on total different things. I'm being very facetious right now. I want to go to there is a political level, and you follow the Eurovision musical contest that our viewers in the United States are not aware of. It's a Eurovision contest is a musical festival going on now for several decades. Um, that was an indication. Israel came out number 2 in that. And a lot of people were saying this is reflective of the attitude of the masses in Europe towards Israel, contrary to the governments. Do you see that as being an indication of such?
I think that it might be considered as an indication. And once again, I'll take you back to history. Look, 1983, we were deep into the First Lebanon War, and it was after the massacres of Sabra and Shatila, which were committed by Arabs against Arabs, and Israel was accused for doing it, falsely accused for doing it. At the time, you might remember that because we are the same.
No, not only do I, sorry for interrupting, not only do I remember that, my unit of the paratroopers, we were outside of Sabra and Shatila when that happened. And we had no idea what was going on that night. We just know that the Christian forces, later on we found out, were directed by Syria. They perpetrated their atrocities there. We had nothing to do with it. So I know this from firsthand.
Exactly. And the world reaction was anti-Israeli, by the way, partly because of demonstrations within
Israel.
Israel
Right.
that were accusing the Israelis of doing it. This is also a pattern that we see nowadays. Now, 1983, after all what has happened, Ofra Haza represented Israel in a Eurovision song contest that for the first time took place in Germany. And she went there with a song, a very political song, Am Yisrael Chai. I don't think that today such words would have been approved by the EBU, and she won the second place. So actually, you see a very interesting phenomenon when Israel is not looking for the favor of the international public opinion, but is doing what is good for itself, for its interest. When Israel is defending its interest and itself, the public opinion in the world is not that unsupportive of us.
Exactly.
They are much more understanding of Israel that fights for its interests and for its survival and existence than for an Israel that actually promotes the interests of its enemies. And this is something that we really must take into account, especially in the situation that we have nowadays in Europe. Don't forget that nowadays the very problematic situation of the Middle East is not something that the Europeans watch on TV. It's something that they meet when they leave their houses. Sometimes it's in their houses, in their streets. The mass immigration that we have seen in the last 10 years has brought the Middle East reality to Europe. And therefore, there is much more understanding to Israel positions and to Israel's defending itself in Europe today than there was before. And you also see it not in the Eurovision, which might be considered as something marginal, but in the turning to the votes, the results of elections all over Europe. The fact that sovereigntist right parties are getting stronger and stronger in most of the countries of Europe has to do with the fact that people in Europe see the Middle Eastern reality that was imposed upon them as a threat, and therefore many of the sovereigntist parties in Europe are clearly pro-Israeli, while as other parties, including our old friends from the past conservative camp, are turning their back to Israel.
That's very interesting that you have that in the countries themselves, but there's also a difference between what considered Western Europe and the former Eastern European countries, who some of them are also members of the EU now. What have you witnessed, and what do you see there happening?
Yeah, well, this is definitely a situation which works emphasizing the fact that in the former East Europe, there is much more support of Israel because they consider the EU, the very hostile EU, as a threat to their national identity, and the attempts of the EU to bring into those countries massive immigration from the Middle East, from Africa, from Muslim countries, also as a threat to their wish to preserve their national and also religious identity. So you have a very different approach to national and religious identity in the center east of Europe and the west of Europe, where the impression is that they completely gave in to multiculturalism.
That's an interesting thing there. We see this difference. These countries of Eastern Europe, who up until, what is it, 40 years now, with the falling of the former Soviet Union, they tried to erase both their religious and their national identities, and yet these countries have come back that much stronger with these elements, and yet Europe that was free have sort of lost that and lost the whole concept of who they are.
Exactly. And this is why they hate so much the EU in the Eastern and Central European countries, because they consider the EU to be a new form of the Soviet Union,
Hmm.
which is a new dictatorship, which is actually telling them which interferes in their lives and dictates to them what they have to do and how they have to live. And the fact that the EU has really become a very anti-Israeli entity definitely plays in our favor, in the favor of Israel, in the very good relations that we have with countries like Hungary, with Czechia, with Slovakia. It used to be also a positive thing in Poland until a pro-EU government came to power in December 23. But still, we enjoy in Poland, I believe, much more understanding to the fact that we want to defend our national and religious identity as a state than in countries like Spain or Ireland or, unfortunately, even Great Britain, where those notions seem to belong to the past.
That's the amazing thing, that the past, instead of preserving the good elements of it, they seem to be trying to erase everything that this whole woke identity that's come around is making these countries, even the good parts about them, making them shed away from it. As I said, you've been covering Europe for a very long time. You've seen the direction. You talk about the history, and part of the problem is the lack of historical perspective of a lot of countries and people of this generation. From your own experience, where do you think things are going right now, and especially in regards to Israel? Um, where should we put our hopes? I always like to be positive about it. I know where the dangers lie and where the things are complex, but do you think there's also places that for hope for Israel in this?
With your permission, I will start with the Israeli part of your question, because I think that there are two very important things that we have to emphasize. First of all, the question of legitimacy to what Israel is doing, international legitimacy, is, to my understanding, irrelevant. Ben-Gurion said in the past, Israel has to do what is good for Israel, not what is good for the for the nations of the world. From 47 on, if we were depending on the goodwill of the nations abroad, I don't think that the state of Israel would have existed today. I don't think that probably the state of Israel wouldn't have existed at all. It's all a matter of interests and countries serving their own interests. Somehow, within us Israelis, there are those who believe that sentiments or emotions or love is something that we have to seek for. And in name of seeking love, we have to sacrifice our national interests. Well, I must disappoint them. Love, sentiments, and emotions were never any basis of international diplomacy or international politics. And we have to give away this sickness of the Jews to be loved. I don't want to be loved. I want to be feared and I want to be respected. This is the language that the world understands, and this way we will be able to survive if we are feared by our surroundings and the world, and if we're respected for what we do. So these two things, I believe, have to lead the Israelis and the Israeli governments in whatever they are doing. I allow myself to remind you that around the disengagement of 2005, Sharon and all his pro disengagement fans said that we leave now the Gaza Strip, and once we leave it, and if we are attacked from it, the world will let us do whatever we want. And here we are. We were attacked in the most brutal way from Gaza. For the first time, we have decided to react as we should have reacted many, many years ago, and the world is against us. So we should stop looking for the support of the world. We should look for interests and alliances of interests. And I believe that if we do that in the current situation of the world, which is quite crazy, we would have enough partners and allies around the world. I don't think that we have to focus that much on Europe. We have the tendency to see in Europe the center of the world. It has to do with the fact that for many centuries Europe was the center of the world, and that many Israelis, in a sense, came from Europe. But we have to look to other corners of the world, look for alliances in those places, and thus strengthen Israel's position around the world.
Eldad, I don't think I could have said it even better than that. You're absolutely right. You said that Ofra Chaza's song, Am Yisrael Chai, and that's what should be escorting us throughout anything we do here. I want to thank you for joining us here on Straight Up on JNS Studios and giving us your insights into what is happening today in Europe. Eldad Beck, an Israeli journalist covering Europe for today, the Jerusalem Post. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Daniel.